and live Kabbalah. So what we are going to be discussing this evening is the Midah of Yesod, the Midah of foundation. And the Midah of Yesod is the weekly Midah. Of course, as we come out of Egypt, we count 7 weeks, and the 7 weeks bring us to Mount Sinai on Shavuot, where we receive the Torah. So it's a transformational process where every week we work on another Midah, on another spiritual component, an emotional component, as well as a physical component. So this week is the Midah of Yesod. It's the Midah of foundation. So now let's begin. Let's begin by first of all defining what the word Yesod means. So the word Yesod means foundation. And foundation, another word for Yesod is bonding. It's interesting that the word Yesod is actually composite of two parts. One is Yud and one is Sod. Secret, and the Yud is Sod. So it alludes to very, very deep spiritual secrets, as well as being foundation, which is bonding. So now, bonding and foundation, of course, are very concrete, and they're very about like when we think about a foundation, we think about a house, and we think about the work that needs to be done on creating the foundation of a house before we start building any higher. So it's described in Kabbalah as being the end of the body. Foundations, the end of the body. Why is that? Because on the Kabbalistic tree, right, there is the higher levels, which is Chochmah, Bina, and Das, understanding. There's the cognition, there's the intelligence level. Then there's the emotional, Chesed, Gvura, and Tiferes. And then Netzach, Hod, and Yesod are about that's fortitude, humility, and Yesod and bonding are about the concrete, and they're about channeling and bringing down on the higher level, first of all, thinking, and then emotion, and then down into the practical. So the last 2 weeks we've been on the weeks of Netzach and Hod, which are referred to as right leg and left leg, which they're holding up the body, and they're about actually taking a step forward and then reflecting backwards. The Netzach is about taking a step forward, and it's about being proactive and having level of fortitude. And Hod is about being about reflecting and about looking at the process and looking at the steps which were taken, or perhaps which need to be taken, and reflecting upon it. And it's synonymous. Hod is synonymous with humility, because humility and acknowledgement are about acknowledging the bigger picture and being submissive to the bigger picture. And we're of course explaining the concept of Netzach and Hod because they're important in it of themselves. Netzach was discussed 2 weeks ago in a recording. Hod was discussed last week. Unfortunately, it wasn't recorded. But generally, Netzach and Hod have to do with levels of battling, and it's battling. Netzach has to do with an inner battle, mostly where a person kind of like overcomes their own inner conflicts, and Hod has to do with confronting conflicts which are on the outside, and sometimes you can't confront them head on. You have to confront them by actually acknowledging and use a different strategy, which is actually taking more of the bigger picture in mind, keeping the bigger picture there. So now all of this brings us to this week, which is the Midah of Yesod, which is foundation, which is really about the culmination of the process. So the process this week, it actually all funnels down in a sense to now bonding and connecting with it could be an idea, an emotional component that needs to be fixed, a spiritual component, and also a physical component. So all of them come together within the midah of Yesod in this week, because everything is about the process of now it's the foundation, and it's been drawn down into the bottom line, so to speak. So if we pay attention, really, there are two sides to Yesod. On the one hand, it's called Yud Sod. It's like the secret of Yud, which is the highest level. The Yud is the smallest letter in the alphabet, and also refers to Keter, refers to crown, which is super consciousness. And the Yud, and we say Yud Sod, it's the secret of the letter Yud, which means it refers to a very high level. But on the other hand, it's Yesod, which is about bonding. It's about being concrete, being down in the here and now, and channeling everything down to actuality. So if you're thinking that it's contradictory, that's exactly how the tribes, the 11 tribes, actually 10 tribes, felt about Joseph. They could not understand Joseph. And why am I saying this? Because Joseph is the away from people, away from distractions, and away from away from the rest of the world. That's how the tribes served God. Whereas Joseph was different. They noticed Joseph that what was he doing? He was combing his hair, right? That's what the tribes were saying, that he was pretentious, and he was into himself, into his own looks, and into and he was like showing off his wisdom, showing off his looks, because Joseph was exceedingly handsome. It says that no other person was more handsome than Joseph, almost in the world. And he gets sold into slavery because the brothers can't appreciate that this person, that this Joseph is actually one of us. Like, how is he related to us? And bigger question is, how does Jacob love Joseph so much if he's not this spiritual being? He's like all about himself, right? It doesn't seem fair that Jacob, that is all about learning, all about the 10th of Jacob, and about connecting to God on that total level, would have a son that's not connected in that way. So that was the reason for their hatred, right? As the Torah says, that they despised him. And the Torah tells us that at the age of 17, he gets sold into captivity. And 17 is the gematria, is the numerology of tov, of good. And this is very important because tov, it says that a tzaddik is known as tov. That it says imru tzaddik ki tov, that a tzaddik is about good. And we're going to get back to that in a little bit later, a couple of minutes. So Joseph was 17 when he gets sold into slavery. Now, after many years in captivity, he becomes the viceroy of the biggest superpower in the world, and the tribes go down into Egypt to try to buy food for the family. And there, of course, they meet. They go head to head with Joseph, and it says that they could not recognize him. So the Pshat opinion that actually Rashi says, and of course nothing goes away from the level of Pshat, is that why couldn't they recognize him? Because it's been 17 years actually, and he had a beard. I'm sorry, it was not 17 years. It was a little bit more than 17 years. He had a beard, so they didn't recognize him because of the beard. But on the deeper level, Chassidut explains that why couldn't they recognize Joseph? Because they couldn't recognize that spirituality could reside in this very dark place, such as Egypt. How could Joseph maintain his level of spirituality? So they recognized that that something was going on with Joseph, but they couldn't understand how Joseph could still be a tzaddik, because their level of righteousness was a level of righteousness which is beyond the world, and Joseph is in the super power of the world, this metropolitan, right? Is basically the New York City, right? The Paris, London, whatever you want to say. And Joseph was not just living there, but he was running the city, and he was running the country, and in effect running the world. So how could Joseph and holiness, right, paradoxically live in a place which is so antithetical to spirituality and to holiness? And that is exactly the aspect of Yesod. That is the aspect of foundation. Foundation, it says that yesh tzadik, yesh amud echad v'tzadik shmo, that there is the concept of a pillar. It says that a tzadik is like the level of a pillar of the world, that he connects the kol b'shamayim uva'aretz, that he connects the level of kol b'shamayim, the level of spirituality, of holiness, with aretz, with physicality, and with the nature, with the corporeal, and that comes down through the pillar of that the world stands upon. Now, on the verse that says Hashem et hashamayim ve'et haaretz, so the acronym for that, Aleph Hey, Vav Hey, we get 17, which is the idea of Tov et hashamayim ve'et haaretz, that the idea that everything comes down, gets funneled down from the spirituality, from the potential into the physical through the tzaddik, the level of tzaddik, the level of Yesod, the level of bonding, which is the level of Tov, of goodness. And why is a tzaddik called Tov? And why is Joseph called Tov? Why was he sold when he was 17 years old? Because Tov is about giving, and giving freely, actually without any restrictions, without any limitations. Whereas there's another level of Tov, which is Chesed. Chesed is benevolence. That's also good when somebody is giving and to others. But benevolence could sometimes be, could sometimes feel good to the person. And the person could feel, wow, I am performing a good deed. I'm doing something good. I'm giving to somebody, and I feel good about that. Actually, the word natan in Hebrew is could be spelled both reading forward and backwards. So natan, when I give to somebody, I also receive backwards. It's reciprocal. So I could also, in my giving, could also be a reward, and I feel very rewarded and satisfied by the level of my giving. So that's the level of chesed, which is also called tov. But the level of yesod, which is the ultimate level of tov, because it's not necessarily about my level of giving and the outcome that I'm going to feel from it, but it's about true, like, selfless giving. It's about the actual action, which is giving. It's not the feeling of giving, it's the action of giving. And many people give, and they kind of like are maybe expecting something back from it. But the level of a tzaddik giving, it says that a tzaddik gives, the tzaddik is giving without wanting to receive anything in return. That's the level of yesod. Yesod, the yud sod, the level of the secret of the yud, comes channeling down all the way to the level of foundation by this funnel, right? The level of the pillar, and it gives, with without limitations, without restriction. So now, why couldn't the brothers appreciate Joseph? Joseph it seems to be that he was a pretty righteous person. He was all good. He was about giving. So why couldn't they appreciate this level of Joseph? And the answer is that the brothers, the tribes, are called shvatim. They're called shevet, and the word, for another explanation of the word shevet in Hebrew, means like a stick, which actually tilts downwards. And it's just interesting that actually a shevet is actually a word in Hebrew for shooting star. It's something that gets, shevet, just shooting from one place to another. And that's what the shvatim are doing. They're actually channeling down what the energy, the spirituality, the holiness of the levels of the forefathers, which are explained in Kabbalah. They're the world of Atzilut, of emanation. The highest spiritual world are the forefathers and mothers. And they are now drawing down that level into the world of Bria. That's why they're called Shevet. And it's almost like the star, which is like kind of like shooting from one dimension to another. And it's that rod, let's say, that is just kind of like tilting downwards, down into the another element. So that's what the tribes are about. And the tribes had to be actually removed from the world in order to do that, because they had to be connected to spirituality. But they could not be in complete physicality and be imbued within it, because they were true to their source, and they had to do that without being infringed upon from other possibilities of taking them away from the focus, which is drawing down holiness. So that's why they picked the profession of being shepherds. They were away from civilization. They were praying, and they were able to look at nature, and they were able to take the world of Atzilut down into Bria. And of course, that was necessary. It's necessary to do. And Joseph is not this type of a tribe. He is a tribe, but yet he's actually also considered one of the forefathers, or he's the fourth of the forefathers. There's only three forefathers, and he, right, because four, F-O-R-E, But Joseph would be the fourth father in a sense, because in Psalms, King David says, Noeg Katzon Yosef, that actually God takes the Jewish people and he leads the flock of Joseph. Flock of Joseph, we don't all come from Joseph, but the Jewish people are called the flock of Joseph because Joseph is an honorary forefather in a sense, but yet he's a tribe, which makes Joseph so unique and which helps us understand what the Midah of Yesod is and why it's so important. So Joseph is channeling down the world of emanation of Atzilus down into the lower realms. But he's not just doing it into the world of Bria. He's not just taking it one notch. He's taking it all notches down. He's taking it to the world of Yetzirah, to the world of Asiya, down into the foundation, down into the world. He's going all the way with it. He's on this train, which is just being directed all the way down into the world of Asiya, of action. Now that's why the brothers, the tribes, could not recognize that. It's in their world, they couldn't understand that. It was like discussing apples and oranges. Like they couldn't fathom such a level of holiness, of spirituality, that it could actually be drawn down into the nitty gritty, into the financial world of Egypt, right? Into their court systems, the police, everything that takes to run the country. It's pretty grimy stuff. And Joseph is there. The world of Atzilut, the world of emanation, bonds with the world of Asiya. And that is the aspect of Yesod, of foundation. And now, foundation. So let's just take that in for a second, because that's a pretty amazing concept to think about, because we normally think that there's spirituality and then there's physicality, there's holiness, and then there's the mundane. And it's true. There are two levels, right? There is the physicality. We open up our eyes and we are in a physical world, clearly, right? Physical bodies. But yet we recognize that there's spirituality, there's holiness, there's something that's beyond us, that there's the source of everything. And Joseph, or the tzaddik, in the level of Yesod, is telling us that it's not a contradiction. This is vastly different. This concept is vastly different than in any other practice, in any other teaching, religion, because according to Judaism, according to Torah, according to Kabbalah, the tzaddik is not somebody that is removed from the world. He doesn't have to be removed from the world to be pious. Just the opposite. It's easier to be removed from the world. And that doesn't indicate that person is necessarily holy. The sign and the mark of the tzaddik, of the Yesod tzaddik, of the level of Joseph tzaddik, right, which is called the higher tzaddik. There's the higher tzaddik and lower tzaddik. The lower tzaddik is actually, just by the way, that's the level of Benjamin, because they were brothers, right? They both came from Rachel, and Benjamin was almost like, not in this world, and he was one. He was one and the same with Joseph, because they came from the same mother, which is Rachel. Just by the way, just about Rachel was different than Leah, because Leah and the other mothers were also kind of like aloof. But Rachel, it says that she was beautiful inside and out. Yifas Torah v'yifas Mara. And that means that it wasn't just a beauty which is from within or a beauty from without, but the inside actually becomes reflected outside. And that's the idea that the physicality is not a contradiction to spirituality, to holiness. And that's the world of Rachel. And that's why Jacob loved Rachel more than the other mothers, because Rachel epitomized that level of tzaddik, of the ultimate level of tzaddik, which is the level of Jacob. Because Jacob was about what? Yaakov was about drawing down holiness in this world. And that's why he loved Rachel. So, which explains why he loved Joseph the most. It's not that he loved Joseph and he didn't love the other brothers. He loved everybody equally, right? And he loved the brothers for what they were doing, the tribes for what they were doing, because they played a very important role. But in terms of fulfilling the ultimate mission, which is not for everybody, it's not a pay. It's not a path on it necessarily that's easy to walk on. The tribes did have that path. They worked on that path together. But the level of Joseph and Benjamin, in a sense, was not a paved path, which is the way Jacob lived his life. He didn't have a paved path in his life. He went through difficulties, and he had to work, and he had to draw down spirituality, holiness in physicality, and then go to the next stage. Who's the next stage over there? The next stage is Joseph. So once again, from Rachel, we have the two sons. We have Joseph and we have Benjamin. And Benjamin is the lower tzaddik and Joseph is the higher tzaddik. Because Benjamin, we don't hear from him really. And Benjamin, is very interesting to note that the temple was built on the plot of the area of Benjamin. Actually, it's a certain part of the temple was in Judah's area, but the mizbech, the altar, was on the side of Benjamin. They were really, it's like that border place between Judah and Benjamin. And the reason for that is why Benjamin, because Benjamin is the idea of the tzaddik, and the tzaddik that wasn't involved at all with anything to do with the world. And his job was to actually not to be aloof from the world, but he wanted to bring down spirituality in the world. But he's not in the metropolitan. He's not in the financing. He's a tzaddik that wills good for the world. That's the level of Benjamin. And of course, that's very important. And we need those tzaddikim. And just by the way, who came from Benjamin, Shaul, the first king of Israel, was from the tribe of Benjamin. And later on, Mordechai, Mordechai HaTzadik, right? Mordechai that, saved the Jewish people, Mordechai and Esther from, Haman and the whole story of Purim. So that level of tzaddik is very, very important. But that's called the lower tzaddik. But the level of higher tzaddik is Joseph, is that in the details, in the restriction, in the emails, in the meetings, in the hustle bustle, and going and getting on the train and going there and walking through the streets and hearing taxis whizzing and horns, right, and smells of hot dogs and sewers coming up from the bottom. Sounds like New York City. And still flourish, and still not just be successful spiritually, but be successful financially, which brings us to another a deeper understanding of the aspect of Yesod, and that is the financial aspect of Yesod, because it says that all financing and all levels of financial success comes down through Yesod, through foundation. And why is that? So Yesod is the change into this world. And for the blessings to descend down to the world, it has to go through a number of channels, a number of funnels. And those funnels are the Sefirot, that each one needs to be perfected or needs to be worked on in order for the channels of vitality, of chai, by the way. And actually the word for a tzaddik, another word for tzaddik is tov, but also chai. Masbiya l'chol chai ratzon, the idea that chai is living, that the ultimate level of chai, of life, is the life of Yesod. So when it says that God, you open up your hands and God, Masbiya, God satiates every living, kol chai ratzon, all level of chai, that comes through the aspect of Yesod. Because Yesod is the end, it's the culmination. It's when everything has been worked through, and now it's on the way forward and outwards. So the level of Yesod is financial. So it said two things. First of all, it says that the financial part of a person's holiness, and all attributed actually to the level of tzaddik, Yesod Olam, and that concept of the tzaddik having the ability to channel down financial blessings to us is something which is spoken about by the Baal Shem Tov. Whether people recognize the tzaddik or don't recognize, oppose the tzaddik, everything that they have in terms of their sustenance comes down through the tzaddik, through the merit of the tzaddik. And this is actually not just the Baal Shem Tov, but the Talmud speaks about this in Tractate Brachot. The Talmud says there about Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa. Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa was a miracle worker in the times of the Mishnah. And I mean, there's stories upon stories of just above nature miracles that he used to do. So there's stories about her. Talmud, that Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa, all he ate for the whole week, he used to have a I don't know what you call it, like a carob, one carob for the entire week. He would nosh on nibble on a little bit of a carob the entire week. That's all he ate. I don't know if that included Shabbat. And it says that the whole world becomes sustained because of Hanina. He suffices with just a carob, but the whole world gets sustained through Chanina bini. It says Chanina, my son. God, Hashem says Kola ulam kulo, right? Nizon bischus Chanina bini, Chanina, my son. And that's the level of tzaddik, and tzaddik of the generation. The tzaddik of generation is the level of he is channeling down blessings to the rest of the generation. I mean, it comes down through the tzaddik, whether the tzaddik recognizes, and obviously he doesn't. He recognizes it, but he doesn't recognize that it's him, because the level of tzaddik is actually of complete level of nullification, complete level of bitul, of there's no identification with self. Whereas the higher other sefirot could be the person is feeling benevolence, or he's feeling gevura, discipline, or he's feeling the independent sefirot. And the level of Yesod, there isn't an independent feeling necessarily, or at all. It's just the channel of everything that comes down, And that goes back to the level of the tzaddik yesod olam. The tzaddik is the foundation of the entire of the world. So that's on a global level, that right, and it actually started with Moshe Rabbeinu. That it says about Moshe Rabbeinu, we say it every day in Shema, in the famous prayer called the Shema. We say, "V'natati gishmechem be'itam," and I will give rain in their proper time. Who's saying this? Moses is saying this. "V'natati," I shall give rain in its proper time. We don't pay attention to that, but Moses is saying, "I will give rain," and it's really God gives rain. So we're taught that it's actually not a contradiction, because Moses is he's not a person. He's not an independent person. When he's saying, "I will give rain," it's God that's actually speaking through the mouth of Moses, which is how Moses taught Torah, and which is how he was involved in leading the Jewish people in every facet. So every tzaddik and tzaddik of the generation has the key within them to channeling down blessings and giving the blessings for parnasah, for financial success. So that's on a global level. On an independent level. So first of all, connecting to the tzaddik of the not generations, but also the tzaddik of the generation. We are more connected to this source of this waterfall, this very strong waterfall of spirituality, of potential, that could also that will flow through us. So that's on a global level, or as a collective level. On an independent level, when a person is involved in the mundane, involved in business, involved in the details, a person needs to recognize that those details are necessary steps to receiving the blessings of Hashem. Somebody once came to the Frierdiker Rebbe, the previous Rebbe of Chabad, of Lubavitch, and they asked him for a blessing. So he said, "I could give you a blessing, but blessing is like rain. And if a person doesn't make furrows and doesn't dig and plant, then as much rain as there is, it's not going to help. A person needs to dig for themselves and needs to plant for themselves." And that's the concept of the details. And the details of the quote unquote mundane, the 6 days of the week, right? 6, by the way, corresponds to the number of to 6 Sefirot. That 6 is Yesod, right? And so all of them generally have to do with Yesod. Each day actually corresponds to a different Sefira, but generally speaking, it's the 6. We call it the 6 days, because the 6 days are called the 6 days of action. And the idea of action is being involved in the detail, but within the detail, I recognize that Hashem gives us the strength to be successful. Like a person should not say that the Torah tells us in Deuteronomy that a person shouldn't say kochi ve'otzem yadi, that my own strength and strength of my arm help me be successful. A person should not say that. It says, "Hu anoten lecha chayim lasav koach." Hashem gives you the strength to do lasav chai, like to be successful, basically. The Unkelus is a translation on the Chumash, tells us that what is this? He translates it as meaning that he gives you ideas to be successful in business. That's what the Unkelus translation says, which is one of the most authentic and important translations on the Torah. That's how he explains that verse. We say he gives you the strength to be successful. He gives you the ideas to do business. So an idea is really nice. And many people have ideas, or many people could have feelings about ideas. But to take that extra mile, like people say, to take that extra mile is the most difficult part of the journey. And starting a business and doing anything that we do is taking that extra mile. And that extra mile is the hardest part of the journey. But that's the journey of Yesod. And that's the most important part of the journey. That's what separates the people that are successful than everybody else. It's that persistence that they have. They have the netzach, the hod, and now they're bonding with the goal, even though they don't feel the goal, and they may have even lost inspiration or sight for it, but they've planned and they're carrying through with the plan to go all the way with it. So on a spiritual level, this is very, very important because the cleaner a person is in terms of being a vessel, in terms of cleansing, the way that they think and the way that they feel is the greater the level of Yesod and the channeling of potential and of financial potential will channel down into their lives. So that means tzaddik. That means holy, right? That's the idea of a tzaddik, and it says that v'amech kulam tzaddikim, that your nation, everybody is tzaddikim, and the level of a tzaddik, even though a person can't necessarily reach the level of being a tzaddik, like what we're talking about, the big tzaddikim, and the tzaddik of the generation, certainly not. But a person could work, as Tanya explains to us, that a person could work on their thoughts and on their feelings, and that's actually, in a sense, the journey and the path of 99.99999 levels of souls in our generation, most generations. But when we do work on our minds and our feelings, we are called a level of tzaddik. We're not the actual definition of tzaddik, meaning that there is actual no negativity, no thought for something negative, and potential for sin, for potential for swaying away, right? So there is that potential for the non-tzaddik, but when a person works on themselves, so they're called a tzaddik in the sense of now there is the ability to channel down blessings through the vessel of the person into this world in the form of blessings. Now we may ask ourselves that if we look around, that's not always the case. It's actually not the case in the world around us, because usually the good people, the righteous people, are not the rich ones, are not the financially most successful, quote unquote, at least to the eye. Whereas the person who is maybe not so honest in business and they're not righteous, they're successful. How does that make sense? If Yesod is that channel of goodness. So that's a question which is obviously a very difficult question. It's a real question. It's a question why do it says wicked prosper in this world until Mashiach comes. But one answer is that the truth is the potential for financial wealth and success does come because of spirituality, does come because of Kedusha, and that's the fact. It's just that it may not be channeled for everybody in the same way that that it would channel when times were different. And what I mean by that was when the temple was built, we had this equilibrium. We had this level of holiness, where physicality touched, connected with spirituality. That was the concept of Yesod, of the Holy of Holies. It says that in the place of the Holy of Holies, it says that what was there. There was the ark, and the level of the ark is the idea of the bonding, the two cherubs bonding together. And that was the case. It says that everything, all goodness, came down to the world through the surface of the temple. Now, after the destruction of the temple, it says that everything became mixed up, and that's what we went to Babylon. In Hebrew, Babylon is from the word mixed up. Bavel is mixed up. And the level of Yesod has been, so to speak, in obscured, and the level of tzaddik a little bit obscured. The Talmud tells us that there's 36 hidden tzaddikim that are in the world, that are constantly actually making this world survive. Without these 36 hidden tzaddikim, which is actually double chai, 36 is twice chai. They're keeping the world alive, because of what they're doing. And most of these tzaddikim actually don't even look like tzaddikim. They may look like very simple people because of that contradiction, that paradox. That's not necessarily the tzaddik that is away from the world, that is the ultimate level. It could be the tzaddik that's in the world, and that tzaddik in the world is actually upholding the world because he's channeling goodness to the world, and to make sure that the world survives. So another answer is that the Yesod and the work that we do in correcting Yesod actually draws down goodness for us, and that's going to be that's something which comes down into our lives daily, but it's going to fully come down into our lives when Mashiach comes, when we're going to basically we're in at a threshold right now of a tremendous shift of consciousness, and that's the idea of Mashiach consciousness, that in very shortly we are going to see this incredible shift in the world, and all of a sudden, like, there's going to be just this like gushing levels of Yesod, touching down into this world, because all those good deeds and all those prayers and words of Torah and benevolence, etc., are actually going to be actualized in the physical world. The reward is going to be within physicality, within the physical world. So it seems like a contradiction, and it is a contradiction on an ostensible level, but yet we don't understand fully what Yesod does, and what the outcomes are. So tonight it happens to be Yesod of Yesod. It's foundation within foundation, and this tonight and tomorrow has within it a tremendous amount of potential, potential of connecting these opposites, and really showing that they're not opposites. And this is actually the reading of this week's parsha. This week's Torah portion is Bechukotai. Bechukotai means that if you go in my path, then I will give you rain. And the word Bechukotai is from the word Chakika. Chakika in Hebrew means to be engraved, because we have two levels of connection. there's concept, and then there's engravement. There's an inner level, and basically two levels of writing. We have a writing which is on parchment or on a book, and then we have writing which is engraved within something. And that level of engravement is the idea of Yesod, of connecting on the level of engraving. That the physical is engraved within, the spiritual is engraved within the physical. Which if we do that, the Torah says, "V'natati gishmecha be'itam," then I will give you the rains in their proper times, and you will receive all these things on all these channels. And the Torah says that it's possible for us to receive all these things if we go in the way of bichukotai, serving God in the way of engravement. That the spiritual is engraved within the physical, and it's not two realities. And this is a preparation also for the new month, which we're about to receive, which is the month of Sivan, which is the month of receiving the Torah, receiving the tablets, and the tablets were engraved. It says about the tablets that the letters went through them. Because that's the idea of engravement, how the spiritual and the physical are engraved one within the other, and they're not contradictory one to the other. So this is the foundation, the Yesod of Judaism. The Yesod is the Yesod over here of understanding really what Judaism, what Torah is all about, is about taking this knowledge and bringing it into our physical mind and bringing it into our physical lives, and taking the mitzvot and bringing them into our connecting. That's the idea of a mitzvah. So a mitzvah is a connection from the spiritual to the physical. That's what a mitzvah is. From the word connection, we become connected with it within our physical lives. Even though we're in the business world, we're in wherever we're at, we're connected by the mitzvah, by the level of mitzvahs of tzavta v'chibor. It's the idea of connection, and that's the whole idea of the tzaddik, and each one of us has the potential of being a tzaddik on a certain level, and bringing righteousness, but true righteousness into the world by having the spirituality being engraved within the physicality, engraved within our hearts and within our level of action. So we're going to stop here. I will say that this is one part of Yesod. There's many aspects of Yesod, many aspects of Yesod. But one other very important aspect of Yesod that's called the bris has to do with the circumcision, has to do with sexuality, has to do with the idea of the connection of the sensual and the spiritual, and how actually they're not contradictory. And that's hopefully a class we could do in the future, adults only, about the Jewish view on sexuality, and of course how it's not separated from spirituality, because Joseph is the idea of Yesod, of bonding, of connection, of the bris, the idea of the covenant. So that we're, God willing, will explore that on a future class. So thank you for joining, and we're gonna wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom and a very good month, and Chodesh Tov, and only blessings on all levels for us. All the best. Shabbat Shalom to everybody. All the best. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi. God bless.
Shabbat Shalom. God bless.
God bless, Rabbi. Thank you so
God
much.
bless.
Beautiful class.
Thank you, Steve. All the best. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi. Bye.